All right, welcome everyone. I'm really excited about this video, wanting to introduce you to a dear friend of mine who's also been a mentor and teacher and all of the above to me, and somebody who's very passionate about similar things that I love to talk about spirituality and personal growth, and it is my dear friend, Melissa Binkley. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah. So in today's video, we are going to talk about trauma and healing and developing your intuition, but most importantly, your academy, the Intuitive Intelligence Academy. But before we dive into the questions, which I'm really excited about, I want to do a little bit more of an intro for you so that people who aren't familiar with your work, because I'm sure a lot of people will be, but for those who aren't, I want to kind of give you a more proper introduction. Melissa is a dynamic and highly sought after international speaker, thought leader, #1 best-selling author, and creator and founder of Intuitive Intelligence Academy, the world's leading school in spiritual development. Melissa is known for her ability to transcend limiting beliefs. She uses several techniques that infuse science and spirituality, personal development, and the quantum field. In 2014, Melissa developed her own mode of a spiritual transformational process called Intuitive Intelligence that is changing the way coaches, healers, and speakers connect with their audience and transform lives and heal trauma through this new healing modality. I'm so excited to talk to you about this more. You have been a busy lady. Like I was going to say, when I met you several years ago, you were a powerhouse back then, but what you've created in the years that I have known you has been pretty incredible to watch. So I'd like to help everyone else kind of catch up with your story because I know a little bit about it if they haven't already. And I think that's such a great way to connect with people is to hear their story and how they, you know, achieved what they achieved, but also the spiritual lessons around, like along the way. So if you could just tell us kind of what got you to where you are now with the Intuitive Intelligence and any like lesson or aha moment throughout that really kind of took you to this place.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the introduction. So, I guess I'll start my story kind of in the middle somewhere around 2009. You ever get to a point where you feel like you're doing everything right, and you're like, I'm doing all the right stuff now. It should all be going better. And for me, I got to a point where cognitively in my brain, I thought I was doing all the right things to heal, to get better. And I had in that year, I ended up my partner left me. I got fired from my job and I ended up homeless all within 6 months. And I had what they call that, I call it your coming to Jesus moment, like dark night of the soul, right? Where I saw the eviction notice on my door and I walked in and I'm standing there and I'm like, how is it? I no longer do drugs. I no longer have eating disorders, or so I thought. I've done all of these things to work on like healing myself from all of my trauma from my childhood, and yet now everything's falling apart. And I said, there's got to be something I'm missing. There's got to be something that's going on, something that's different, because according to the outside world, I was doing all the right stuff. But what I hadn't learned at that point was that, it was part of my soul's path and this awakening of understanding that all of that work that I had done was on a plane on the physical, I'm going to heal my physical body. I'm going to do these things, but I hadn't worked on any of my I hadn't done any of the internal work. And that year was my first connection into energy medicine of any type. My first understanding of spirituality in any kind of way besides the religion that I had grown up in, and any of that kind of stuff. And I literally just dropped to my knees and I said, show me, give me something, because I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go at this point. And that was my first moment of surrender, which I have done it many times since then and not really knowing what that was, but started in that path of listening to the things that were put in my way to allow me to start healing. And through that journey in the last 9 years, I said, 9 years to almost 10. My whole life has completely changed. I went from that moment of losing everything. And like, I say before every breakthrough, there's a breakdown. You must break down old beliefs, ideas, and habits to break through to a new existence. And that reordering of my life, everything, I lost everything. Like everything was gone. For the second time in my life, I had lost everything. And it was so that I could reorder, and my life looks nothing the same now. Like 9 years later, I have an academy, an international organization, and I've created this process, intuitive intelligence, and done all of these things from that moment. And for me, the biggest lesson in that I now see looking back from 2009 to now was that I really thought I was doing the right things. Like I really thought, because I was no longer doing drugs, that I was no longer had what I considered to be a severe eating disorder. I was healthy. I was doing all these other things, that I was doing all the right stuff. And you just don't know what you don't know. And the universe was giving me messages, and finally I got what I call like the 2x4 message, which was like I hit by 2x4, and now I've learned that I can have the same lessons with a little bit of grace instead. And so that journey of these past 9 years has created this ability for me to work with people and teaching this intuitive intelligence work, and in the up and down journey of turning it into a business, which can be hell in itself, into really something that is going to allow me in the next few years to create a global movement, which is the goal, so that we can raise the consciousness of our planet together.
That's awesome. You said a couple of things I thought were really poignant, and I, if anyone's like watching me while I'm listening to you talk, like the reason I have this grin on my face is because I'm like, yes, yes, yeah. like I've been in those places, especially those second sort of like come to Jesus moments where it's like, wait, I thought I already did this. Like I lost everything. I reorganized my life. I thought I was doing everything right, and then everything falls apart again. You're like, oh, it is so hard, but you did something I think that is so key, is asking like, okay, wait a second, what am I missing? Or what is it that I don't know yet, and allowing for that message to come through. I think that that's pretty important, because when those breakdowns are happening, because you don't get the breakthrough like at the same time. It would be nice if it's like the same time, where like your life is falling apart, and then like the sky opens up. Like, and there's usually like a little bit of a period where you're stumbling around, and struggling through that. So I really love that you said that. And then there was something else, because I think this is really important, is understanding, and maybe this is where we're going with this conversation too, but understanding that there is a way to learn without maybe having so many of those 2x4 moments, right? Like that you said, like I don't know what the words were exactly, but something like a more graceful or easier time to like really pay attention to the nudges when they're much sooner than your life falling apart. And I think that that's a topic that, I want to dive in more with you, and about your academy and the processes you create is so much. I get reflected back. So many people really struggle with listening to their compass, their inner compass, their intuition, and it causes so much problems. I am, no different. There's still times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew better. And you find out like later. So I would love to like dive into that more. And so the next question I have, which I think will be an interesting kind of segue into this, and so we can talk about this more about intuition and looking inward. And but you've said more recently, I've seen a lot on your newsletters and things that you've said about how we've kind of missed the mark with the whole mindset movement. That there was like a big push towards it's mindset, and everyone really focusing heavy on that, and how there's like, like what is missing, and like why that it's not just enough to like focus on your mindset, because I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring this up, because I think this is one of my favorite topics, and one of the most important things to talk about is that, when we talk about, especially in our society right now, 70% of all adults have trauma. And when we think about healing, changing our mindset is not enough to heal trauma. Like, you can't just go and be like, I'm going to change my mindset about this, and all of a sudden my life's going to be great, right? And so when you think about like NLP or subconscious programming or things like that, well, what caused that in the first place? So that's underneath, what's the underlying experience that's actually creating the subconscious patterns. It's actually creating the mindset, right? Because if it was all about mindset, we'd all be able to do it, and we'd all be able to do it easily. So why does it work for some and not others? Because the piece underneath it is your energy. It's your energy and your consciousness that are creating your experience. So when you change your consciousness, the physical will change after it. And so it's not your mindset that you need to change, but the actual consciousness and the feelings that come before. So instead of thinking, right, like, which is mindset, thinking, we should be feeling. And so we need to learn how to feel and shift that. So our brain has a heart on it, and it's got 40,000 neurites. The heart has this brain, and it actually controls our cranial brain. And that then turns and controls our body. So if we're just focusing on the brain and the mindset and the thinking, we're missing the whole foundation of what's actually creating the patterns in the brain in the first place. And so by allowing ourselves to understand that by transforming, if we want to transform our trauma and our patterns into life-altering experiences of creation, you have to go beyond the brain and beyond the way of thinking and actually tap into the energy field, your body, the feeling, the heart, and the consciousness that we're all connected to that created it in the first place.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful point. And I think what's great about this is, and I can speak from a lot of experience because I'm trained in NLP. That's part of one of my backgrounds in training is being certified in NLP. And I was really like heavy in the mindset, for a while there too, along the journey. But I think what it is it's a great tool, just like Band-Aids. There's nothing wrong with Band-Aids. Like, we still need, I got some Band-Aids in the bathroom. Like, Band-Aids are fine. But when you're bleeding out and you try to put a Band-Aid on it, it's not the right time. It's not the right tool. And so that's what I think is really important, is that I think a lot of people are having that same thing. Like, I'm doing everything right. Maybe they did a lot of mindset work and it felt good at first. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, wait, this isn't what is missing here. So I'm really glad that, I saw you kind of coming speaking out about that publicly. At the same time, I was like, okay, I was having this, I was on the same boat where I was like, it's about trauma, people, we got to heal our trauma. So that would be like my next question. Perfect segue again is, so let's talk about this. You said 70% of people have trauma. And what I think is really interesting and what I would like to convey to anybody, who I get to be put in front of, whether it's, an audience online or someone I'm working with one-on-one, is that a lot of us have a misunderstanding about what trauma is, how much trauma is actually more common than we think. It's not just somebody going out into war and having bombs, and like that is a traumatic event, but that there is more of like an everyday common trauma that's not being talked about. It's behind closed doors, and yeah, it's just something that I feel really passionate about. So I'd love to hear more about your take on that.
Yeah, what I say when I talk to people about trauma is I say trauma is emotion, is shock from an emotional, emotional shock from an event. So that could be anything. Like, you could have had your hair pulled when you were 5 years old, and and it created a traumatic response, right? This emotional shock for you that then creates this repeating pattern in your life. It could be just being at home and listening to your parents yelling at each other. That creates, this thing. And especially in the society where we grew up in our, the generation, so we're what, Generation X, and, and the baby boomers that were before us and the millennials, like, we grew up in a state where our parents thought that the best thing that they could do was to yell at us or to say these things, that they were doing the right thing, that's how you took care of your kid. Like, there's even studies that they did back then that said, too much coddling of the baby was going to cause issues, right? So now there's these kids that have attachment disorders and things because they weren't coddled. All of these things, that's trauma. That's developmental trauma, different types of, things like that, where this is your common everyday traumatic experience. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the word trauma that people don't realize that it is some of the simplest things that create the most impactful lasting experiences. So when I look back over my lifetime and the trauma that I had, yes, I was raped, and yes, I was molested as a child, and yes, I was beaten by my father. But some of the most things that I have now come to find years later that impacted me the most were not the things that were considered the worst trauma. It wasn't those pieces. It was the feeling of abandonment that I created, like when my mom left, when she was trying to save us, or there's these other experiences of not getting the Christmas gift when everybody else got Christmas gifts, and so not feeling like I was deserving at a certain age. That those were actually the ones that impacted my life more, throughout creating patterns in my life than the big ones, right? Like so there is no degree of trauma, and we have to stop putting it on a scale of like, oh, that was the worst, and this was not, because that's not how our brains work. Our brains and our bodies respond to an event the same, whether we cognitively, right, on a conscious level, and I like to say cognitively over conscious, because I think the word conscious and consciousness gets so confused, right? So on a cognitive level, whether our brains think that was a really bad trauma or that wasn't a bad trauma, right? Like, so like, what is bad really? Like, we as humans are the ones that make the judgment. Our brain isn't judging it. Our bodies aren't judging it. It's just responding the same to everything, no matter what. And that's what we have to realize, that there are so many people out there that are walking trauma, walking trauma, and that they're living that experience on a daily basis and don't even know that they've experienced trauma, because that's not what they're calling it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you brought that up, about the level, like there's no hierarchy of trauma. That I think is so important for people to understand. And I'm really glad also that you can, because I hear this all the time, this is how I feel, but to also say, like, it sounds crazy, but like the things that we would think is like the worst thing we could have gone through or a person can go through is usually not the stuff that trips us up in our daily life and really affects us. It's not the kind of trauma that is the hardest to recover from. And I feel the same way. Like some of the physical abuse that I suffered, it's like I didn't even pay attention to it for years and years and years. It wasn't on my mind because I was so caught up in the emotional and psychological things that happened to me. And that's still the hardest things for like me personally and what I see. And I hear that over and over again. So I think that that's, important to touch on, especially for people who may but just be hearing this information. And then, sometimes there's that feeling of like, oh, well, what I went through isn't that bad. But if it's causing problems in your life, in your relationships, in your sense of well-being, your self-worth, what you can call into your life, then it is a big deal. Like this is a big deal for a lot of people. So again, I'm really glad that you kind of touched on that, because, I wasn't even thinking about that. And it's something I think is really important to say. So I would like to talk about your academy, and learn more about it and share it with everyone else. I'm trying to look for it here. Oh, you have this tagline that I freaking love. It says, "Park your brain and engage your soul."
Yes.
I feel like that says so much. But you're going to walk us through an exercise that can help us sort of connect to our intuitive intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is it's a very simple technique. It's taught by many different people. And it's one of our foundational pieces that we use, like, especially when I go work with young kids, because we can use this with some, kids as young as 3 years old. We can teach them this piece plus a couple of others, but it's such a simple technique that so many people don't realize that it's what is needed. So our brain and our heart are meant to work together, to work in what's called coherence, right? To be on the same wavelength, and that wavelength, that when you create that coherence, it's a 0.1 megahertz. It's actually the same wavelength that the earth vibrates at. And so when we create this coherence between the heart and the brain, it literally changes your electromagnetic field and allows you to harness that energy and to connect into planet Earth. And so you're literally becoming this like antenna of healing, and it allows you to heal your body. And it's a simple breath that we use that I call heart breathing, that I'm going to teach everybody. We're going to just walk through a 2-minute exercise on this. But what it's going to do is you do this, I say, start doing this for a couple of minutes every day. I have clients do this a couple of minutes, and our students every day for a couple of weeks. And literally, because the heart is the connection to our field, the collective consciousness in the field, and it starts to regulate the heart and the brain together, it starts to turn off the trauma signals in the brain, connects you to the field, and people start manifesting stuff in their life out of nowhere. And so it's really great. And so I say, if there's nothing else that you ever do, if you do this one thing, it in itself will have life altering experiences for you. So you can either close your eyes, or you can keep them open, but I like to close my eyes when I do it because I like to really focus. And you're going to imagine that you're seeing breath coming in through your heart space. Now you can, when you're breathing in, you're going to see that breath coming into the heart space. You're going to breathe in for a count of 5. And as you're breathing in, you're going to notice that that breath is going to come up, and you want it to come up all the way to the crown of your head. So that's called the crown chakra in some societies. It's where the pineal gland is, and the pituitary gland, the crystal palace, which is where what is the alchemist inside of us. So you're going to breathe that in. And when you get to the top where that breath is at the top of your crown, you're going to hold for 5 at the top. And then once you hold, that's where it starts to decalcify the pineal gland. And then you breathe back out through the heart. And you do that for 10 times. So we're just going to do like 5 times, but that's the process. Okay, so we're going to breathe in, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then hold at the top for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then breathe back out, seeing that breath come out through your heart. And then breathing back in again for that same 5. And when you're holding that at the top, really hold and squeeze that area. Because a lot of us have calcified pineal glands, and that is your connection to the universe. And we want to hold on to that, and then you breathe back out. And breathing in. And this also allows you to get your body into what's called the alpha state, which the alpha state is where you need to be able to manifest, to heal. In beta, which is our regular consciousness where we normally are, we can't actually access the field in beta and in that space. And so we want to learn how to do this so we can really connect. And then when we can go one step further with this, and you can actually ask the heart a question at this point. So the heart is actually where the wisdom of the universe is, and where we should be thinking from instead of from our cranial brain. So maybe you have a challenge or a problem or something that's going on in your life that you would love real, true, intuitive guidance and wisdom from. So you would say from something along the lines of, from the single eye of my heart, or from the center of the God field in the universe, please show me the answer to, help me with, whatever that is, and then finish that sentence. And then just take a few moments, and you may get a color or a black field with something that pops up, or an image or words.
Wow, this is so great. I love it.
Awesome.
Because I love the feeling of like, I try to do connected breath as much as possible, but that feeling of like picturing it through your heart and up to your head, and the connection between the two, I think I've never done anything quite like that. And it just does feel like an expansiveness, and anything that can do that for me. Like, I kind of joke around, I have this like worry line that's starting to happen.
Oh, I got one too.
Okay? And in some ways I'm like, it's kind of like a rite of passage, you know, it's like, I'm kind of proud of it. But I also recognize when I wake up in the morning, or just as life goes on, and I look at it and it's like really creased in any particular time, I kind of like, oh, I'm not listening to my intuition, because I am really trying to figure this out. Like, it's just kind of funny. So that the reason why I bring it up is because that oftentimes signals like a strong contraction in my mind. And that had the opposite effect, where I was just like, I felt like I could like float away. It's really great. I love that. I'm going to definitely apply that to my practice. Yeah, that was awesome. So just tell us a little bit more about the Academy, and what people, if they're interested, how they can find it, find more information about you, but just also a little bit about the Academy and what you're offering.
So at the Academy, we have, obviously we have the Intuitive Intelligence Training Program, and we have other programs to help healers and people that want to know how to heal their trauma, like go out and do this work in the world, right? Like, it's more that my goal is what I call 1 billion rising, is by me teaching others and them going out and using and teaching others, we'll reach 1 billion people in the world. And so the goal with the Academy is to create a community around people that have experienced this work and how they can share it, so that, you know, when you have the ability to connect with the heart and the collective consciousness and the higher self, and use that to improve your performance and heal your trauma and manifest, it really creates a different experience for everyone around us. So we teach that. We teach, you know, the way to connect to the field so you can facilitate thinking and, you know, create profound change. But the difference is we also give the science behind it. So we are taking the woo-woo out of what might be considered woo-woo and giving the quantum physics and the neuroscience and the heart science behind all this work. So it's a really great way to not only just heal yourself, but to learn how it really works. And so especially for those left brain people that want to know, a little bit more about how all this works, we give all that information, and it's part of the trainings that we do at the Academy to really help people to align with and access their intuitive intelligence. And that ability allows you to get moment-to-moment guidance and empower heart-based living and truly heal from the traumatic experience in society that we live in. And by each of us doing that for ourselves and then learning how to do this work and sharing with others and teaching others or creating a business out of it, that effect of reaching those people will in itself shift the consciousness of the world in our lifetime. I truly believe that. And so we run trainings twice a year. We offer, we have our trainings and our certification programs. We also do immersive retreats all over the world. We like places like Australia and Bali and France and India and things like that. So you can come and do an immersion if you don't want to do a full training, but you just want to immerse yourself in these types of techniques and really integrate them. We have people that come to our retreats and literally heal from physical issues at the retreat, completely shift the way the field that they're in and the consciousness level that they're at, and they can come and shift and change. So you can do that. You can do the training. We offer sacred circles and different conferences and events. So there's a lot of different ways that for whatever level you're at or where you want to be, that you can come in and work with that. Or if you have something really traumatic, or somebody, like we work a lot with give back and sexual trafficking and sexual trauma and PTSD. Like if you have something and you're like, I just need to work with someone on healing this stuff, we have healers and trainers on staff that you can work one-to-one with someone instead of coming and taking a training, depending on if that's the experience that you need. So different ways that we offer the work to the world, and as we grow, we keep adding on more things. We're bringing in new teachers and doing things like that. So
that's awesome. Yeah, there was something on your website. You said by supporting healers, creatives, artists, light workers, highly sensitive coaches, and speakers to live their purpose, tap into their intuitive intelligence, and create a global impact. I just love that, because I was like, sounds like my crowd, my type of people. I love that you're doing this. You have an upcoming training right now, right? As we're filming this.
Yeah, actually our next training, so they run twice a year, January and June. So our next one starts after the new year in January.
Awesome. Yeah. So if people are interested, definitely check out the Intuitive Intelligence Academy. Is that what it is?
IntuitiveIntelligenceAcademy.com. You can go there, and on that you have links to, you can call in. There's a phone number, and you can call in to talk to a clarity coach, or you can shoot us an email and we'll get back to you. You can find out about the different programs that we're offering, and we'd love to talk to you.
Perfect. And I will make sure I link all that information and how to find you in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me. I've enjoyed this so thoroughly, as I always enjoy it, but it's even more special, I think, to be able to have our private conversations that we usually have over lunch or something and share it with the world. So thank you so much for joining me today.